My name is Rabbi Norry. I think most of you probably know that. And I'm the interim rabbi at Temple Beth El in Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm also a vegan and vegetarian now for more than 30 years. I've been in my late 20s. I stopped eating meat. And about 10 years after that, I stopped eating fish. And cheese and eggs came shortly after that. And I always, at Passover time, get inundated with questions about what can I make for vegetarians at Passover time. I sometimes feel like it's, people panic. You see those images of people going, and running in all directions. Like, I have a vegan coming for Passover. I don't know what to do. And so I'm going to make it easy. It's going to be super easy. And both things that we make today are going to be easy to make for Passover. And also easy to make anytime you have, veggies or vegans over for dinner. And there's ways to, when it doesn't have to be kosher for Passover, there's ways to make these dishes even more yummy, delicious that include things that you wouldn't be able to use for Passover. The first dish that we're going to make is one of my favorites. And I make it sometimes at home, and I often make it for holidays because it's a nice thing that you can make in advance and have ready. It doesn't have to be timed perfectly for when people come over. And it is Portobello mushroom stackers. Okay? It's a relatively simple recipe, and you can make a lot of variation. So I'm going to show you one way. But along the way, I'm going to tell you a couple of things you could do to make it different based on your personal preferences, vegetables you like or don't like, anything like that, okay? And you can make as many of these as you want. It's a very easily expandable recipe. You can make 2 portobello mushrooms, or you could make 20. Just depends on how many people you're feeding and how much space you have in your oven. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is talk about the ingredients. And obviously they're portobello mushroom stackers. So you can see, I don't know if you see the other camera that says Hillel, that's my cutting board here. Right, I'll refer to that. Portobellos are great. They're very flexible. You can cook many different styles with them, and they hold up. They're sort of hardy. But what we're going to need to do first is, you can see these dark gills underneath the portobello. I don't like those. They give too heavy a flavor. They release too much moisture. They get kind of gritty when you eat them. All mushrooms have gills like that, but the portobellos, they're really, really thick. And they've got this big old stem in the middle. So since we're going to stack things on top of it, we're going to have to get rid of that stem, and we're going to have to get rid of the gills. And that's actually very simple to do. I usually do this over the sink, but one is you're going to want to wash the back of the portobello because they're almost always dirty. Okay, some people say don't wash it, just brush it with a brush or with a paper towel. I don't know, it doesn't seem to harm it, in my opinion, especially if you're going to cook them, to rinse them underwater, and it's just quicker and more easy, in my opinion. So the first thing is we're going to get rid of that stem, and really you just want to be careful not to break the mushroom in half. Okay, so don't manhandle it or anything, but you just want to pull it out. It should pretty much come right out. And if there's a little bit left in there, don't worry about it. Doesn't matter. We really just want to get basically flat, and I'm just going to toss this away. Put it in my compost. Then I'm going to take a spoon, a small spoon, and I'm going to just sort of scrape those gills away. I'll do a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it so I don't crack the edge. You want to try to keep the thing, you don't want to go at it too hard, but you do want to get the gills. So I just use the top of the spoon and remove the gills. The theme of what we're doing today and of a lot of veggie cooking is little things make a big difference. This is a little thing. It's not hard to do. It takes a little time, but it doesn't require any special tools. And there you go. You know? Big difference between the two. Okay?
You did that like a real pro. We can tell you've done more than 2 of those in your life.
I've done more of 2 of them. And I've cracked my share of the edges too, right? Like I learned, you know, a little bit of that turn thing because, you know, I broke them a few times. Sometimes if I'm really trying to be fancy, I'll trim the edges like that because it just looks, you know, like restaurant-y. The restaurant would do that.
Excuse me 1 second.
Yes.
We can't see what you're doing with your arms.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, yeah, so your hands are below the screen.
No, do you see the other? There's a screen that says Hillel.
No, let's see. Maybe.
There's a Zoom screen that I have a camera on.
Have it on gallery view.
Oh,
Yeah, switch to gallery.
Oh,
or you can, yeah.
Got it now.
Thank you.
Got it?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So you can see there's like a little difference here between, you know, the trimmed edge and the not trimmed. Whatever. Don't trim them, trim them. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the flavor, but, you know, it just if you're serving it a little more formally, that's a little thing you can do. So that's tip number 1 is remove the gills. It'll improve the whole recipe all around. All right, now, the next ingredient is spinach. I'm going to go from the bottom to the top, right? We're going to stack all of these ingredients. The next ingredient is spinach, and I like to use the baby spinach, cello or baby spinach. It's nice and soft and nice and easy. You can use frozen spinach though. I'd use frozen leaf spinach in this case, not chopped, because you're gonna cook it up and you want a little bite to it. But fresh spinach is very easy. And here's tip number 2 to make it better. See these little things? The stem, right? Do that. You can eat those stems. And if I were just cooking for myself, I probably wouldn't go through and remove the stems. But I'm making a festival meal. I'm making a gourmet meal. I want my guests to feel special. And maybe this seems like a lot of effort. Really, I'm going to go through each and every little tiny leaf and do this. But let me show you something. See that? That's from what I did earlier on. And the bottom line is you just don't want to eat all that stem. So the spinach is so much smoother and creamier when you don't have that little stem creeping in and telling you otherwise. Then what I do is I take a lot of spinach, enough to fill a big stock pot. Okay, so several bunches of spinach. And then I wilt them down. Just a little, you don't have to cook them, just wilt it all till it's all, you know, broken down. Doesn't have to be very well cooked at all. And what you'll get is spinach that looks like that. Right? And let it cool. Now,
Rabbi, what volume of spinach do you think you have in the end? 2 cups? I couldn't tell how.
Yeah, well, I'll show you. You'll want to yield enough to, but yeah, like a big pot like that yields down to about 2 cups. Yeah, something like that. Okay. And you'll want to have a layer, you know, I guess like 1/3 of a cup or something like that on the bottom of each mushroom, right? Just a little bit. I'll show you how we do that. Okay.
Quick question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I missed what
don't be sorry.
What are we cooking it in the pot? Was it
pot.
water, oil? What'd you say?
So I add a tiny little bit of olive oil and a little bit of pepper. And this is I don't know, I don't know what your Passover, kosher for Passover rules are, but here's a product called Bragg's Liquid Aminos. And I cook with this a lot. It's made from soybeans. And if you eat kitniot, beans and small things, rice, etc., on Passover, and you buy this before Passover, you can use it on Passover. And it is an acceptable substitute for soy sauce, which usually has wheat in it and is almost always not kosher for Passover. So Bragg's Liquid Aminos, just buy it before Passover if you eat kitniot. And I added a splash of that in because it just gives it a little salty umami. But not too much, because I don't want this to be the dominant flavor. Just a hint. Okay. So now I have my Portobello. I'm going to suggest that you make all of the vegetables, prepare all the vegetables ahead, and then assemble all at one time. Hey, Margaret. So first is the Portobello, then is the spinach. We've got our wilted spinach, and I'm going to let it cool down. Okay? Now, on top of the spinach, I'm going to put some onion, just thinly sliced onions. And I like to use Vidalia or sweet onions because I don't want this to be a oniony dish, right? I just want to have a little sweetness, a little something underlying it. And when you cook it right on top of the spinach, it gives that spinach flavor and it softens up the onion real nice. And I'll just slice this onion up and I'll put one slice across on each stacker. So I slice it across so I get little rounds, just like that, and I'll set them aside. And it's pretty thin, right? That's like not quite a quarter of an inch, little less than a quarter of an inch. If you want a big, thick slice of onion, you can do that. But I think that, again, the idea is that the stacks are all basically equal. And you slice through it and you get a little bit of each thing together. So that's the onion. It's very simple. Next is eggplant. And this recipe calls for just a regular big purple eggplant like this, none of the thin Japanese or the graffiti ones or the small little Thai eggplants, although I guess you could use those, but I want to get a round, right? Again, I'm trying to make a stack, so most things are going to be round on what I'm doing. Here's another small little tip. For this recipe, I'm not going to peel the eggplant because I want it to hold together. I'm not trying to make like baba ganoush or anything like that where the skin will kind of get in the way. This is going to help it keep its shape and a nice round shape. And it's going to cook so that the skin is really going to be negligible. You won't even notice it. Now, the other thing I like to do with eggplant, and again, I'm going to slice it relatively thin, right? I'm not making a big inch thick cut. I'm making more like a ½ an inch cut. See? Finger size, maybe. Okay? And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to slice all the slices. And then I'm going to set them on another tray or in a glass dish. And I'm going to salt them heavily with kosher salt. Don't worry about it being over salted. Okay, I'm salting it heavy. because what I want to do is I want to draw out some of the moisture. Eggplant can be very moist, and some of the bitter. Ideally, I'd let it sit like for a half an hour or an hour. And you'll see it'll start to sweat. And I do both sides, and I'll set it aside. And you'll see that in a little bit. It'll start to sweat. Once it's well sweated, half an hour or something like that, I rinse them off really, really well. Okay? Rinse them under running water well. Get all that salt off. Right? We didn't salt them so much for flavor as for function. It will have a little salt left in it, but not so much. We don't want them salty like that. And then I cook them in a little olive oil, just a little bit of olive oil. I don't fry them. Just a little olive oil. I cook all the rounds in a large skillet just till they're soft. I pre-cook them. I'm not, again, like the spinach, I'm not trying to cook it all the way. I'm just trying to like halfway there. And what you'll end up with are these. Okay. Little rounds. See, they're a little bit cooked, not completely. They're not soft all the way through. They still hold up pretty good. But you can see the skins started to wilt there on the edge, just a little. It was probably about 5 minutes, just softening them on both sides with a little bit of olive oil. I don't even salt them because they're salty enough. Okay, so we've got our portobello with the gills removed and the stem removed. We've got our wilted spinach. If you eat kidney oat, with a little splash of Bragg's, otherwise just pepper and olive oil. We've got sweet onion, just simply and thinly sliced. Then a layer of pre-cooked eggplant. On top of that, we're going to put tomato. Okay. I went to the market this morning and I bought some small heirloom tomatoes. You want to use something beefy, not like a little, not like Roma tomatoes. Although if that's what you have, you could use them. But you want a kind of beefsteak or heirloom kind of tomato. And these, I don't mind cutting chunky. Right? So I want to take off the bottom because I don't really want, I want a good round. This is, I mean, I can eat this, but I don't want to put that on top and serve the butt end to somebody. Right? So I'm going to take relatively thick slices, again, about a quarter, a little more than a quarter of an inch, and just set them aside. The other thing I don't want to use here is too much of the top. Again, eat it, but I'm being selective in my ingredients here. And you see how that, look at that. I mean, that's so much nicer than a little Roma tomato. That's really going to be yummy. It's almost like putting tomato sauce on top. Okay. Now, let's put it together, okay? Wait, one more. I didn't say this in the list of ingredients that I sent out, but then I saw it this morning at the market. They had really yummy looking organic asparagus. So I bought a bunch of asparagus, and again, with just a little bit of oil, barely. I even just sprayed the pan. Cast iron really hot, and I like charred them, you know, like almost grilled them, because I really just want them cooked but not mushy at all, and I want them to really hold up. Okay, that was it. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. Okay, now Here's how we're going to do it. Okay. Can you see how those start to sweat a little bit already? See how there's little droplets of water there? And that's just a few minutes, right? Those will be really well sweated. Okay. So I'm going to take a cooking tray. And line it with foil. And then however many you're making, they cook down a little bit. So if this is a main course for somebody, I think 2 is not unreasonable. When I make these not for Passover, I add a layer of tofu. Somewhere towards the top or right on top of the onion. And it's delicious. I mean, then that's a more substantial meal if it has something like that in it. But if you're just, serving this as a main course at a Seder or at another meal, for a kid, it might be enough. For a guy like me, I might like 2. Okay? Now, we're going to assemble it. I put down my portobellos and I'm going to salt it a little bit. Just a touch, not much, just a touch. That too is a small little detail that will mean the flavors through the whole thing. And I want, I haven't done anything to prepare the mushrooms. So I want them to have a little flavor on their own. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil on the bottom underneath each one because I don't want them to stick, and that'll help them cook evenly from the top and the bottom. All right. Now I take a little spinach, and I don't want to make, I want to squeeze out most of the water from the spinach, and I don't want to just put it like bloomp, like a ball in the middle. I want everything to be kind of flat. So I'm going to spread it all around and try to get it even over the whole thing and close to the edge. And do the same on all of them. You'll notice I'm using my fingers. They're clean and they're efficient. Okay, that should be enough. Then onion. I'm just going to lay the onion down just like that. Simple. Just like that. Then I'm going to put my eggplant on top of that. And then I'm going to put the tomato on top of the eggplant. Simple, right? Very, very simple. If you've sliced things thinly, or if the tomatoes are small, or the same with the eggplant, do 2. That's fine, right? It doesn't have to be so perfectly stacked like that, but these seem to come together real good. I'm going to drizzle them generously with olive oil. Pepper over the top, a nice healthy dose. And I like to, now since the spinach is mostly cooked, the eggplant is mostly cooked, the onions are sweet, so I'm not worried about them having bitterness, and the tomato is right there on top, and the mushroom is right on the bottom. So I'm going to stick them in a hot oven, 400 for about 20 to 30 minutes, I would say. Check them at 20. I put them low in the oven on a high oven, 400 degrees. And then—
No asparagus at this point?
No asparagus, because the asparagus I already cooked, okay? So it goes in the oven at 400. Often, if I want to cook something hot, but I don't want to burn it. And it looks like it needs a few more minutes, but I'm worried that it's going to burn somehow. I leave it in the oven and turn the oven off. That's a whole little trick, because then you can kind of walk away and it's not getting radiated. It's just the general heat of the oven, which reduces actually pretty quickly. So if you're worried that it's going to burn, you're not sure, is it done enough, but I don't want to overdo it, just turn it off and leave it in there. And then come back, 5-10 minutes later, it'll be fine. All right. So I'm going to stick this in the 400-degree oven, and then wonder of wonders, miracle of miracles, whoop, it's magically done. Hey, oh, wow. How about that? That's incredible. How did you do that? You know what they call that? They call it the hero. You see that in all the cooking shows. They put it in the oven and then magically they pull out one that's already done. How did you make that lasagna in 10 minutes? I made it this morning. This is going to be our dinner tonight. So there you go. All right. Now, here's how we're going to plate it. I'm going to take one, put it in the middle of the plate. A little bit of parsley, fresh parsley. After all, it is Passover, and that is the spring holiday and the green holiday. So we want greens. Vegetarians eat vegetables. And then I'm going to put 3 asparagus across each one. Just like that. And a lemon wedge. How's that? Pretty freaking good, if you ask me. I can hardly wait to eat it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Isn't that good? And if you wanted to put them all on a plate and sort of pass it, you could have a big platter. You could have the stackers on one side and the asparagus on the other, and a row of lemon wedges, and just tell people, put some things on top. And then, whoosh, the whole thing comes apart. Let's see if I can do this. Maybe not.
Oh, mm-hmm. That's good.
Beautiful.
Looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yummy.
It really does.
I'm hungry.
And again, there's a few little steps, but none of that is difficult or hard. It's all very simple cooking. Yeah.
Rabbi, this may be a no-no question, but do you have vegan cheese, right?
So yes, there is vegan cheese. The problem with vegan cheese for Passover is there's really no certified kosher for Passover vegan cheese. Oh. And almost all of the commercially available vegan cheese is produced with lots of different ingredients. So it can be a little problematic to find. You can kind of make your own homemade vegan cheese. It's not that hard, and most of them have nuts as a base, and then they're thickened, or held together with something. They're coagulated with something. And again, depending on your kosher statuses, some of those things you can use on Passover, but it's hard to find them with certification for being kosher. And so you certainly have to buy them ahead of time and kind of buyer beware, right? Like if you're going to get something that doesn't have supervision on the label, you sort of have to be careful about what you get and know what's in it. But something like agar, right, which is made from seaweed. It's a coagulant made from seaweed. And lots of vegan cheeses and vegan food and other foods too. There's nothing chametz about agar. So you can use that. But again, mostly what I do is I go a week without, or I make a very simple homemade, like almost a spreadable vegan cheese that isn't really like, I don't try to make a hard cheese, but mostly I just forgo it for the week. This would be good with some Parmesan cheese on top. Yeah, for sure.
I was just like, that was the finishing touch. But
right. Well, if you have people who eat cheese and you're not serving a meat meal kind of thing, yeah, put some Parmesan on top of it, right? For sure. And when it's not Passover, for sure. That's a great option. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions about that?
I wondered about garlic. Was that just personal preference that you didn't put any garlic in?
No, my personal preference is for lots of garlic.
Oh.
But I didn't put any garlic into, there's nowhere to put garlic mix into except into the spinach, which when I just cook plain old spinach, I usually put a lot of garlic into it. Oh. So if you wanted more garlic, if you wanted garlic, I'd put it, mix it in with the spinach when you wilt it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then my second question is, I don't know that the people that come to my table are going to be satisfied without quinoa or something like that,
right,
for a starch,
right,
with it. And that seems like that would be a good addition. I don't remember what your side dish is, whether it's a...
Right, so it's not a starch, but this would be great with quinoa on the side, something like that, or a quinoa pilaf or anything like that. It would be great with mashed potatoes or oven roasted potatoes, some kind of, herbed roasted or herbed mashed potato. I love mashed potatoes. So, cooked veggies and mashed potatoes, that's like a great meal. Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah. Good. Any others? No? Okay, then if not, I want to get to our second dish, which we're actually going to cook. There's no hero required for the second dish because it's a little bit quicker. And it's kind of an unusual dish. I don't know of a lot of savory dishes made with dried figs. But this is it's an unusual dish, but it's one of those dishes you just sort of have to believe that it is good because it sounds odd, not bad, but odd. So the main ingredients in this dish are figs, dried figs, green Turkish figs, these hard green ones, not the black mission, and not fresh figs. Those are softer. You want the ones that are really kind of like dense. They're called Turkish figs or green figs, and they're sold dried. They look like that in the middle. It's the Fig Newton fig, right? Okay, so figs and onions. For this, I'm also going to use sweet onions, just because I like them. I live in Georgia, and we eat sweet onions here, and but you can make this with regular onions for sure. The recipe uses a lot of onion, and it wouldn't hurt for one dish to use 2 full-size onions. But it's really kind of personal preference. But onions are really a star of this dish. They're not just there to make the base flavor or to give something underneath. They're really one of the main stars of this dish, and I kind of think that's why sweet onions are even a little bit preferable. We're just going to peel them. All right. And then I just kind of want to chunk them, right? like that. Large dice or chopped. That's it, just like that. All right, I'm going to turn on my skillet, and I'm going to turn it on high, medium, high. Set those aside while the skillet gets hot. And then I'm going to prep the figs. Now, these figs come with this like really inedible stem right here. Right? Those of you who are in my Mishnah class know that the oket, or the stem of fruits, has a special distinction in classical Jewish law, but in culinary law, it's undesirable. And I use these scissors. Boop. Easy. If you don't have a good pair of kitchen scissors, get a good pair of kitchen scissors. Cutting the stems off shiitake mushrooms, the stems off of this slicing parsley. I mean, there's so many, these are so great. Okay. And then I just want to also chunk these. I'm cutting them just in one direction, about 1/4 of an inch wide. It doesn't really matter. Now, these are tough to cut, so be careful. Use a sharp knife and watch your fingers. Don't slip.
How many figs was that for 2 onions?
It's about equal amounts of figs and onions. Right, so it's like about 1.5 cups of onions, 2 cups. I'll probably throw in a few more figs here too, because I have a few more. I think that was about 8 to 10 figs, something like that. So maybe a dozen is a good number.
Did you put oil in the pan with the onion?
Not yet. I haven't put the onion in yet. I'm just heating it up. All right. Can you see back there? Yeah. Hang on.
Just heating it up. Always heating the pan, I see.
I think it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Let's see if I can. How's that? Can you see there?
Yep, now we can see it. We were just worried that if the oil was there, it was going to.
It's going to burn. No, I love cooking with cast iron. So great. And you can really let it get hot. So I really let this get hot. Okay, but it's probably hot enough. Then I'm going to take some olive oil, and I don't really measure, but it's about 2 tablespoons, right? 2 glugs. I count tablespoons by 1, 2, just like that. But I'm not shy with it, and I'm going to just toss the onions in. You can tell that it's hot enough if it sizzles. It should sizzle. And I'm just going to let them cook. I want them to brown, but not burn. And I'm going to add a little salt, just a pinch, not too much, and a little pepper. Now, the main flavoring, the main herb is sage. And I bought some fresh sage. Don't use powdered sage. It really, this is one of those times that calls for fresh herbs. And you're just gonna do it real thin. They call it like chiffon or ribbons. It's sort of as thin as you can get, but still just not, I don't want to chop it up because I want to see the little strips. Okay? And a couple tablespoons rather, of shredded sage. And, all right, but I'm not going to add that just yet. Oh my God, that's good. I mean, really. Let's see how these are doing. All right, they're starting to get there. Not quite. So while the onions are cooking, I just want to share a little reflection on Passover and on eating. My biggest concern for most people on Pesach is that their food is not celebratory. We've become so bogged down by the rules of Pesach that we have completely lost the spirit of it. I think those of you who know me enough that I don't just throw the rules off. I'm not suggesting that the rules don't matter or we shouldn't follow them. I'm suggesting that if that is all you think about, then you are missing a big piece of the picture. The food of Pesach is supposed to be meaningful, joyful. It's supposed to reflect spring, opportunity, growth, and liberty. When we eat and drink at the Seder, we're supposed to rejoice. Our food experiences over Passover have to bring us joy. Very little is more joyful than natural and nourishing food. My tip for Passover cooking is to cook fresh food. Avoid boxes, cans, and jars. Make onion soup from scratch with onions. Cook fresh, good food. Use good, fresh farm produce. It's liberating. It's literally the roots of our holiday experience. And since we're talking about liberty, I just want to make the pitch to liberate our minds from eating meat and animals. I ate meat for a long time, and then I stopped. And I have felt for 30 years that I was liberated. And certainly it's true that the animals I would have eaten have been liberated. How can we celebrate freedom and liberty and the end of tyranny when we are still the oppressor? Let the animals also be free and have liberty. They also want to live. And there is such an abundance of incredible food gifted to us out of the earth. All right, that's the end of my pitch. Once the onions are nice and brown, see that? You want a little of that browning in there. That gives it some really yummy flavor. And it's gonna kind of match the color of the figs. And then I'm just gonna throw the figs in. Like that. And mix them in. Now, I don't really have to cook those for too long because I'm not trying to cook the figs. I'm just trying to soften them. And I don't want them to get mushy. I'm not making like a compote, right? So I don't want them to get mushy. I just want them to soften a little bit. So I'm going to let them cook down in there for just a few minutes. And since you're going to be making this in advance, probably, you really don't have to cook them hardly at all. You can just reheat it at the last minute and, you know, they'll be fine, so long as they're soft all the way through. But you can see how they start to get that glaze, a little of the glaze from the oil that the onions had. And once those have softened up just a bit for a minute or so, I'm going to take that fresh sage and toss it in there. All of it. And mix that in. Now, again, if you eat kidney oats, the dish can be eaten just like this. Put it right on the plate, and it's absolutely fantastic. But if you eat kidney oat for Pesach, or if you're serving this and it's not Pesach, the other thing you should include is beans. And I like to use white beans because they're not too strong. They match well with the other ingredients. And this is just a can of beans. Usually if you're eating kidney oat on Passover, you're cooking your own beans, not using canned products. So cook beans one night or the night before or 2 nights before, and then you'll have them for various recipes, including this one. And I just dump those into. And if you are using beans, it's also kind of nice to throw a splash of white wine in there. Deglaze the pan, give the whole thing a little brightness. You could also splash a little fresh lemon juice in there to give it a little bit of brightness. It's a very earthy kind of recipe. So a little bit of brightness goes a long way.
I was taking notes when you may have put the wine in. Did you put both wine and lemon in?
I'm sorry?
I wasn't watching, I was writing when you put wine in, if you put wine in. Did you put both wine and lemon in?
I did not. I didn't put any wine in this one. I just don't have a bottle of white wine right here. But I would do either or. It just gives it a little more Mediterranean flavor. One gives a little more, you know, citrusy flavor. Mm-hmm. I guess that's also Mediterranean. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that's it. It's done. That's a big, heavy thing. I need 2 hands. Doesn't that look good?
One of the things that seems nice about it is the variety of textures that I think you have. I'm not eating it, but you have the creaminess of the beans and the chewiness, since you didn't totally soften the figs, the chewiness of the figs. And
right, it's got a little bite to it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the onions are nice and soft. I'm still have to chew the figs, right? They're not, but they've lost some of their sweetness, and they have a little sage and onion. So it's just delicious. Absolutely delicious. And again, this could be like a main course with the beans. It's actually a lot of food right there. We combine that together with the Portobello stackers on the plate, a little bit of quinoa. Bing, bang, boom. And this is so simple. I mean, chop the onion, chop the figs, throw them in the pan. That's it. It's so good. And it's unexpected. It's not like, oh yeah, here's green beans. I like green beans, but they're expected.
Yeah.
This is just kind of exciting. And honestly, if you wanted to change the spice profile and use something other than sage, if you wanted to do basil, or you wanted to make them, more of like a cumin and coriander kind of thing, you can really change the flavor profile. I just think sage together with the onions and the fig, it's just so good. So good. I'd even serve it with a little fresh sage just sprinkled right on top. Yeah, good. Other questions? What are you guys thinking of making? Who is hosting Seder? Who is hosting Seders? Do you have your menu yet?
No.
One of the things I'm making is the carrot kugel that we had the recipe last year. I love that. Margaret and Jan were responsible for that one.
That was so good. That was the first time I made that, and that was Natalie Sikora's recipe. I want to make sure she gets credit for that.
It was delicious, and everybody loved it.
Can you share that recipe again to us? Do you have it?
Sure.
Share it? That sounds really good.
Yeah, I'll share it. It was good.
Well, we're going to make these things today.
Cool.
Very good.
Awesome.
And Rabbi, I'm going to share that my grandson is vegan and he's living in Tel Aviv. And so I'm going to be sharing these recipes with him. He's a marvelous cook.
Great. Fantastic.
Rabbi, I think you're going to live to be 100 years old eating like this. Is that the goal?
That'll be all right with me.
This is
maybe 120.
Yeah, Marcia, I'll tell you what, I'm glad you said that. It makes me feel really happy. My goal, the reason I became a vegetarian first was I became aware of how connected my health and my diet. And I knew there wasn't much I could do about certain things, but that I could do something about other things. And diet is one of the things, what you eat is something you can do something about. So I found that very empowering. And I did want to try to avoid some of the degenerative stuff that comes from our diet. But I don't eat this way to live longer. No, I don't. I eat this way to live better and happier. I feel better. I am happier. I'm more enlightened. I don't have to give energy to the embodiment of lots of things that really didn't make me happy to eat that way, really didn't make me happy. It really isn't good for you to eat that way. So the intellectual realization and then the embodied realization that I feel better, I'm happier, and I'm glad to not participate in the broader industry of meat production, which.
Well, 2 years ago, my kids in Pittsburgh became vegetarians, and they're enjoying it. Barry was here for a week, and he cooked the whole week. It was great. We had great vegetarian food for a week.
It's part of what inspired me to start cooking, is because way back then, 30 years ago, if you wanted decent vegetarian food, you had to make it. There wasn't a veggie menu at every restaurant, like none. And I used to go and I would look at the side dishes at a restaurant, and there'd be like nothing for me to eat. And I'd look at the side dishes and I said, could you put all of these on one plate for me? And that's my dinner.
Veggie plate.
That's what they do too.
Yeah, it's a great way to do it. Some of it's a great meal for me. I can have corn and spinach and potatoes and rice and beans.
Well, they're on a cruise now, and they have a separate vegetarian menu on a cruise. You can eat really well on a cruise vegetarian.
Yeah.
And probably vegan too.
It's kind of the golden age. There's so much available. There's a lot of resources. I had to subscribe to a magazine. There was no internet. So if you wanted veggie recipe, where are you going to get vegetarian recipes?
Vegetarian Times.
Right, the Vegetarian Times. What a great magazine. I mean, that thing, I subscribed for years. That's probably the longest.
They've done Jewish holiday meals.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. And the only cookbooks you could find back then were like, you know, brown rice and broccoli kind of cookbooks. I mean, it really wasn't, there were very few wide open-minded vegetarian cooking things.
Well, now there are a lot of keto products.
Right. Yeah. It's the
grocery stores. I'm not sure whatever that is, to tell you the truth. It's just high protein.
Yeah, that's right. That's basically what it is. Mm-hmm.
Rabbi, I don't mean to jump holidays, but when you're putting the sage in the onion and figs, that's a very Thanksgiving flavor for me. Mm-hmm. I think that would be great at Thanksgiving.
For sure. This would go great with Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah. Sweet potatoes, you know, that kind of thing. It's got a lot of that sort of profile. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do for dessert?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rabbi. That was fun.
My pleasure. What was that, Barbara? You said, what do I do for dessert?
For dessert.
So I have a couple of go-to simple desserts for Pesach, because when it's not Passover, there's lots of vegan baking. Right? You just don't use eggs and you're fine, or milk. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. For Passover, I go to fruit. I'm like fresh berries, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, or like poached pears. I like poached pears. So I'll, you know, at the beginning of Passover, I'll make a thing of poached pears and I'll just have, you know, half a pear for dessert here and there. So that's sort of what I like to do. The other thing that is good for desserts is chocolate. Passover has all kinds of chocolate. There's all kinds of vegan chocolate. And I'll probably go out sometime this week and buy a bunch of nice chocolate.
Sounds good. I love chocolate.
Me too. Me too.
Rabbi, I'd really like to know how you're doing on your vegan gefilte fish recipe.
I got nothing. I got nothing there. I wish there are decent vegan matzo ball recipes, but none of them are kosher lepesach. They all have stuff like that, you know, you can't really have on Passover, or they're just not that great. So I haven't quite solved the vegan matzo ball problem.
Oh, so you're going to work on that first before
I can work on that. I think I'm going to work on that first. Yeah.